Society has a way of marking a woman for a single misstep, yet she bears it with the grace of a storm-hidden sun. The grand hall of Ashbourne Manor glittered with 1,000 points of light, the chandeliers dripping crystal as though trying to rival the stars themselves. The assembled guests, resplendent in silks and velvets, murmured behind lace-trimmed fans, their whispers like a tide of judgment rolling inexorably toward one solitary figure. She stood near the edge of the ballroom, her gown modest yet refined, the pale lavender fabric catching the candlelight in gentle waves. Despite the elegance of her posture, her eyes betrayed the storm within, an unspoken dread sharpened by 8 years of silence and secrecy. Her name was barely spoken, yet wherever she passed, the air seemed to thicken with speculation. A slip of a glance, a misjudged word, and the court of society had already decreed her guilty of sins she had never committed aloud. In the shadows of the hall, she clutched a small embroidered handkerchief, the delicate thread worn thin by countless nights of concealed tears. It was the only token connecting her to the child she had hidden, the son of the very man whose presence now dominated the room with a quiet, commanding authority. The Duke of Ashbourne, a figure of statuesque composure, moved through the throng as though he were a force of nature, unyielding and yet undeniably magnetic. Every eye turned toward him, yet it was not the public admiration that held sway but the private, almost imperceptible interest he cast upon her. Their past, unspoken and laden with consequence, hung in the spaces between them like the delicate crystal that caught the light, bright, fragile, and capable of shattering at the slightest touch. Whispers curled around the pillars, murmurs of impropriety and daring independence, yet she held herself upright, a portrait of quiet defiance against the cacophony of judgment. Each step she took was measured, precise, as if to prove to the world, and perhaps to herself, that dignity could endure even when society had long since abandoned her. A hand reached for the hem of her gown, smoothing a wrinkle that did not exist, and she pressed her lips into a line of control, forcing herself to breathe through the tremor that threatened her composure. It was then that a note, small and unassuming, slid along the polished floor to her feet. Its edges were creased, and the delicate script hinted at both intimacy and threat. She bent gracefully to retrieve it, her pulse quickening, yet no one in the ballroom could have guessed the significance of those words. A shadow of the past, a hint of exposure, a reminder that the son she had protected for so long might no longer remain hidden. The Duke's gaze, steady and inscrutable, met hers for a heartbeat too long to be accidental. There was recognition there, a flicker of something buried beneath years of formalities and silences. He saw her, truly saw her, and yet the reason for his fixation remained obscured by layers of social expectation, rumor, and personal history. A chill ran through her despite the warmth of the candles, for she understood that the reckoning had begun, whether she was ready or not. Rain lashed against the tall windows, the steady patter echoing the storm of dread and anticipation within her. Guests turned from laughter to observation, drawn to her as if the world itself sensed the truth poised on the edge of revelation. The room seemed to constrict, each whisper pressing closer, until she could feel the weight of a society ready to strip her bare in reputation if not in spirit. Yet even amid the scrutiny and judgment, she held the secret that defined her, the child she had concealed with unwavering resolve. A soft sigh escaped her lips, barely audible, a fleeting surrender to the fear that had shadowed her for years. And then, with the careful grace of a woman accustomed to navigating treacherous waters, she lifted her chin and allowed herself a single, deliberate step toward the center of the hall. Eyes followed her, breath caught in anticipation, as the first threads of scandal began to weave around her like a silken noose. Somewhere in the distance, the Duke's expression hardened imperceptibly, the first recognition of a truth long buried flickering in the depths of his dark eyes. She did not yet speak, she merely existed, poised between innocence and revelation, between shame and the quiet, unyielding power of secrets kept for love. And so the ballroom held its breath as she moved through the glittering light, carrying with her the weight of 8 years of concealment, the spark of forbidden connection, and the promise that this night, this gathering of whispered judgment, would change everything. A single gesture can unravel the carefully stitched tapestry of a lifetime. The morning light, pale and hesitant, filtered through tall windows, illuminating the delicate dust motes that danced above the polished floors of the Ashbourne estate. In the quiet of her chamber, she discovered a small parcel, wrapped in plain brown paper, tied with a ribbon of deep emerald that she did not recognize. Her fingers trembled as she untied it, revealing a single glove, of fine leather, supple and warm as though it had been held close to another's hand before reaching hers. Alongside it, a folded note, its script precise and measured, sent a shiver through her, Some truths cannot remain in shadow forever. The simplicity of the gesture, so restrained, so deliberate, sent her thoughts spiraling. It could be an ally, a foe, or the Duke himself daring to pierce the veil of propriety. For 8 years she had shielded her child from the world, from scandal, from the man who was his father, yet with each passing day the threads of concealment frayed further. The glove, the ribbon, the inked words, they were harbingers, tokens of recognition and challenge intertwined. By noon, whispers had already begun their quiet assault. Servants spoke in hushed tones, carrying rumors into the hallways where polished mahogany and silk tapestries seemed to amplify the insinuations. A careless mention of her absence at yesterday's gathering, or her late arrival to the morning tea, was enough to spark speculation. They spoke of daring independence, of impropriety in her movements, of a boldness that society had deemed unacceptable in a woman of her station. And yet, despite the scrutiny, she moved with an elegance that defied their murmurs. Each gesture was precise, each glance calculated to shield her secret while drawing attention to her dignity. In the drawing room, where sunlight fell upon the marble hearth and gilded frames, the Duke arrived unannounced. His entrance was as commanding as ever, yet his eyes, dark, unreadable, linger longer than politeness allowed. He observed her not as society did, with judgment and curiosity, but as one who measures the weight of hidden truths. Their encounter was fleeting, a stolen moment in the midst of rigid expectation. A book dropped from a nearby table allowed their hands to brush, and though their fingers scarcely touched, a spark of recognition passed between them, unspoken yet undeniable. He looked at her then, past the veil of modest attire, past the careful composure, and his gaze faltered at the faint trace of familiarity, a resemblance he could not yet name. The child she had concealed, her heart's most guarded treasure, stirred in his absence, and the resemblance, the eyes, the posture, the subtle tilt of the head, was already a whisper in the corridors of his mind. By afternoon, the tension of the morning had thickened into scandal. The noblewomen gathered, exchanging glances heavy with judgment and curiosity, questioning the nature of the parcels she received and the time she spent in the secluded gardens. A young viscount's careless jest hinted at a liaison, a child, a sin, and though unspoken, the insinuation struck like a blade. She stood, composed, in the drawing-room as the echoes of laughter and murmured speculation pressed against her, her breath measured, her hand steady upon the edge of the velvet chaise. Yet within her chest, a quiet defiance burned. Each token, each rumor, was a challenge she would meet with wit and courage. She had survived 8 years of secrecy and fear, she would not be undone by whispers. And in the corner of the room, the Duke's presence remained, a shadow against the sunlight, his posture stiff with restrained concern. Though he spoke no word, his eyes followed hers, searching for the truth beneath her calm, perhaps sensing the bond that society could neither see nor sanction. Even as the afternoon waned and the first chill of evening crept through the hallways, she could not shake the sense that each gesture, each whisper, each careful glance, was a prelude to a revelation that could no longer be postponed. The glove, the note, the emerald ribbon, they were not mere trifles but keys to a door she had long kept locked. And somewhere, in the growing shadows of the estate, the Duke pondered a likeness, a resemblance, a child he had yet to meet, and a truth that threatened to upend every expectation, every carefully maintained mask of propriety. As the candles were lit and the first visitors arrived for dinner, the hall seemed charged, every movement, every glance fraught with potential discovery. She passed through the room, dignified and poised, but her heart quickened with the knowledge that society's whispers had drawn the first line of fire, and the tokens that had arrived so innocently were already shaping the tide of scandal. In that moment, she understood with unerring clarity. The next steps would determine not only her future but the fate of the child she had kept hidden, and the Duke, he who had begun to see what no one else could, was poised on the edge of understanding a truth 8 long years in the making. Truth is a torch in the darkness, but one must dare to lift it before it burns the world around them. The study at Ashbourne Manor was hushed, the kind of silence that presses upon the lungs with weighty expectation. The fire burned low in the hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced upon the polished mahogany and rows of leather-bound volumes. She stood near the window, hands folded delicately before her, the faintest tremor betraying the control she so carefully maintained. Outside, rain tapped a staccato rhythm against the glass, a mirror to the storm of dread and anticipation that had shadowed her for years. He entered without ceremony, the Duke's presence filling the room as though the very air acknowledged his authority. His coat brushed the carpet lightly, yet every movement carried weight, precision, and an almost imperceptible hesitation. For a heartbeat, he regarded her silently, the dark eyes she had once known in a different life now narrowed with curiosity and an unspoken question. She met him steadily, refusing to falter, yet the secret she bore, the child she had concealed for 8 long years, pressed upon her chest like a stone. "It is time," she whispered, voice barely audible over the patter of rain. "You deserve the truth you have sought without knowing it." He inclined his head slightly, a silent invitation, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed his apprehension. She motioned toward a small chamber adjoining the study, where the soft rustle of blankets and a muffled, sleepy murmur revealed a presence long hidden. With a careful step, she led him there, her heart hammering with fear of both revelation and rejection. There, in the warm glow of a single lamp, sat the boy. His dark eyes, wide with curiosity and innocence, lifted to meet the Duke's gaze. In that instant time seemed to falter. Recognition flashed like a striking spark. Those eyes, the line of the jaw, the subtle tilt of the head, they were his, unmistakably so. The Duke froze, every breath caught between disbelief and wonder, as the weight of 8 years of silence fell upon him. She knelt beside the child, her fingers brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "He is yours," she said simply, the words carrying the burden of a lifetime of hidden love, fear, and endurance. "I have protected him, hidden him, because I could not risk the world taking what is yours and mine in equal measure." The Duke's gaze softened, but it did not yet release the tension etched into his every feature. "You why?" The single word, fractured and restrained, held centuries of societal expectation and personal betrayal. She met his eyes, unwavering, and replied with a quiet dignity that pierced even his formidable composure. "Because love, even unacknowledged, demands protection. Because a child's innocence must never be weaponized against him. Because I feared you would be denied the very son you created." The boy shifted, clutching the edge of the blanket, sensing the gravity of the exchange, yet too young to understand its full weight. The Duke knelt slowly, the motion deliberate, measured, as though approaching a truth both fragile and overwhelming. His hand hovered above the child, trembling slightly, the hesitancy of a man unused to vulnerability made all the more poignant by the years he had unknowingly missed. "You bear a burden far heavier than I could have imagined," he said at last, voice low, threaded with awe and tentative remorse. "I had no idea." All this time, his words faltered, swallowed by the enormity of the revelation. She allowed herself a single, shuddering exhale. 8 years of careful concealment, of whispered prayers and silent nights, of navigating society's cruelty and her own loneliness, had led to this moment. And yet, even in the intensity of exposure, she felt a fragile hope bloom. Perhaps the walls she had built around her heart could be lowered, if only just enough for the truth to be met with understanding rather than judgment. The Duke's gaze lingered on the boy, then returned to her. A mixture of wonder, guilt, and the stirrings of an emotion he had long denied shimmered in his eyes. For a moment, the world outside the study ceased to exist. No whispers of scandal, no rigid expectations, only the three of them suspended in the fragile clarity of revelation. "You have given me a treasure I did not know I had lost," he said finally, voice soft but resolute, the first real crack in the armor of formality that had kept him distant. "And yet, you have kept your dignity in the face of everything society could hurl at you. I do not know if I deserve such courage." She smiled faintly, a ghost of both sadness and relief. "Courage is all a woman can claim when the world demands she bend without break. But I have done more than survive, I have waited. And now you must decide what comes next." A silence settled, neither heavy nor oppressive, but charged with anticipation, as the Duke absorbed the truth that had remained hidden in shadows for nearly a decade. Outside, the storm began to wane, droplets sliding slowly down the window panes, leaving a clarity that mirrored the fragile understanding forming within the room. The turning point had arrived, delicate yet irrevocable, and both knew the path forward would demand more than social grace. It would demand hearts daring enough to meet truth with courage and love with unflinching honesty. To love in the face of scandal is to write poetry upon a world that demands only prose. The ballroom of Ashbourne Manor shimmered under the brilliance of countless chandeliers, each crystal reflecting not only light but the weight of expectation that hung in the air. Society's elite had gathered, their whispers punctuated by the clinking of glasses, each murmur a sharpened blade aimed at her reputation. Yet she stood at the center, composed, the pale gold of her gown catching the firelight as though daring the world to judge her courage rather than her missteps. The Duke entered, his presence immediately drawing attention, though his eyes sought only hers. The crowd seemed to fade into insignificance, leaving only the taut thread of connection that had grown stronger with every stolen glance, every shared secret, every word left unspoken. The child she had guarded so fiercely, her son, his heir, stood quietly behind her, clutching the small handkerchief that had once been her solace in lonely nights. He approached, each step measured, deliberate, his gaze unwavering. The room, alive with speculation, felt suspended, as though even the chandeliers paused to witness what was about to unfold. When he stopped before her, he did not speak immediately. Instead, he extended his hand slightly, the gesture formal yet charged with intention. "You have endured more than the world could measure, and yet you have done so with a grace I cannot fathom," he said, voice low, steady, resonant with restrained emotion. "All these years, I sought truth without realizing it had been before me, veiled only by fear and love alike. No longer shall it remain hidden." Her breath caught, but she did not falter. "You speak as though the world will simply accept what society deems scandal," she replied softly, her voice a quiet defiance. "Do you not see what it has demanded of me? What it still demands?" His eyes darkened, no longer with judgment but with determination. "Let the world demand what it will. I care not for whispers nor stares. The child, our son, stands with me, and so shall you. I claim what has been denied to me by circumstance, by silence, by fear." There was a pause, a heartbeat of tension so thick it seemed to pulse in the air itself. Then, with a subtle gesture, he lowered his hand and gently lifted the boy into his arms. The child's small fingers curled around the Duke's wrist, a mirror of recognition, trust, and the silent acknowledgement of blood shared. In that instant, the walls of propriety and scandal that had confined them all these years seemed to crumble. The crowd, sensing a shift they could neither name nor fully comprehend, fell into murmured silence. Eyes followed the trio, and yet no whisper, no judgment, dared approach the gravity of the moment. The Duke turned his gaze back to her, and in that look lay both apology and reverence, acknowledgement of pain endured and respect for the courage displayed. "You have given me a son, a life I never knew I had the right to claim," he said, his voice cracking just slightly under the weight of emotion he had long restrained. "And in doing so you have given me you. If you will allow it, I wish to walk forward together, neither of us bowed to the cruel dictates of society, but rather guided by the truths we now embrace." She felt tears threaten the corners of her eyes, a mix of relief, longing, and the fragile bloom of hope. "I have waited for honesty, for recognition of what is right, and not merely what is expected. If you offer me partnership, not just protection, then I will walk with you. Together, for him, for us, and for whatever future we dare to claim." A subtle hush fell across the room, as though even the chandeliers held their breath. The Duke knelt, not in submission but in a deliberate gesture of reverence and promise. "Then let us face the world together," he declared, voice resonant with authority and tender resolve. "Let no whisper nor look unworthy divide what fate has finally restored." She extended her hand, and he took it, strong yet gentle, a connection that spoke of mutual respect, rekindled love, and a commitment forged in adversity. The child, now nestled securely between them, glanced up with innocent eyes that reflected the bond finally made visible. In that moment, the ballroom ceased to be a stage of judgment and became a witness to a truth that no scandal could erase, no whisper could diminish. The firelight danced across their faces, illuminating triumph tempered by humility, love tempered by trials endured. And though the eyes of society would continue to watch, the declaration had been made, their hearts aligned, their roles as guardians and partners affirmed, and the path forward, though uncertain, now lay open, bright with the promise of courage, honesty, and unyielding devotion. The tension, so long coiled, finally released in a quiet yet potent triumph. She allowed herself a single steady exhale, and for the first time in years she felt the weight of secrecy lift. Their future, fragile yet undeniable, stretched before them, and in that room, under the gaze of the world and the soft flicker of chandelier light, love claimed its rightful place. Some truths must wait in shadows, but when they emerge, they demand nothing less than the full measure of love. The gardens of Ashbourne Manor lay bathed in silvered moonlight, every dewdrop shimmering like a captured star, each pathway a ribbon of shadow and light. The air was thick with the scent of lilacs and damp earth, and the distant murmur of the estate's fountains punctuated the quiet as if nature itself had paused to witness what was to unfold. She walked slowly, deliberately, her gown whispering across the stone path, carrying with her the fragile certainty of everything she had fought to protect. The child she had hidden, the truth she had borne alone, and the tentative hope of a future claimed at last. He appeared at the garden gate, the Duke's silhouette framed by the lanterns that lined the walk, steady and unyielding. No words were spoken at first. His presence alone held the weight of authority, desire, and recognition. She stopped a few paces away, and for a suspended moment, they measured one another in silence. The culmination of years of longing, fear, and restraint distilled into a single shared gaze. "You have walked through shadows longer than most could endure," he said finally, voice low, threaded with both reverence and the raw ache of unspoken years. "I have been blind to the light you carried, yet I see it now, clearer than any rumor or false whisper could ever allow." Her heart constricted at the sincerity in his tone, yet she remained guarded. "And if society still demands condemnation? If our actions are judged before our hearts are considered?" He stepped closer, closing the distance between them without breaking the quiet dignity she insisted upon. "Let them judge. I answer only to what is true, only to what matters. Our son stands between us, a living testament that love need not yield to fear. And I, no longer ignorant, no longer blind, stand with you." The boy, sensing the gravity of the moment, ran lightly to his father, small arms wrapping around the Duke's knees. The Duke bent with deliberate care, gathering the child into a protective embrace, his eyes lifting to hers with a mixture of awe, apology, and fierce devotion. In that gesture, centuries of societal expectation, whispers of scandal, and the weight of secrecy dissolved into the clarity of family reclaimed. "You have endured more than you should ever have been asked," he murmured, voice trembling, "and yet here we are, together. I will not allow the world to fracture what has taken years to survive." She stepped closer, the faintest smile brushing her lips. "Then we walk forward, not hidden, not ashamed, but claiming what is rightfully ours, the love, the child, the life we have preserved against every obstacle." He took her hand, strong, deliberate, unyielding, a physical tether to the vow his words could not fully contain. Their fingers intertwined as naturally as breathing, the connection between them a promise of protection, passion, and partnership unbroken by time or circumstance. The child nestled between them, eyes wide, sensing the gravity of the unity he had long been denied. Above, the moon emerged fully from behind drifting clouds, casting silver light upon the trio. Shadows fell away, revealing their faces illuminated by both firelight from the manor and the ethereal glow of moonlight. In that brilliance, there was no shame, no judgment, only the undeniable truth. Love had endured, courage had been rewarded, and secrets kept in shadows had finally emerged to claim their rightful place. The estate, once a stage for whispers and judgment, now bore witness to triumph tempered with humility. The Duke's voice, firm yet gentle, broke the silence. "No longer shall fear dictate our steps. From this night forward, we are bound not by society's opinion, but by truth, by loyalty, by love that refuses to bend." She nodded, tears glimmering but held in check, a testament to strength forged through years of sacrifice. "Then let the world watch. Let it murmur and speculate. We have already chosen the life that matters most. And it is enough." For the first time in nearly a decade, she felt the weight of secrecy lift entirely. Hands held, hearts aligned, and with their son between them, they walked slowly back toward the manor, each step a quiet defiance of expectation, each glance a reaffirmation of the bond forged in hardship and protected with unwavering resolve. The gardens, silvered and serene, seemed to exhale with them, the soft rustle of leaves and the gentle trickle of fountains marking not an ending but the commencement of a life reclaimed. And though whispers would persist and society's gaze would remain, nothing could diminish the power of the truth, the depth of their courage, or the love that had finally been allowed to breathe openly beneath the vast, forgiving night sky.